Okay, so I'm still having fun with the Atelier system, and one thing when it first came out, I was thinking, oh, there aren't that many modules. Is there enough to play with? I'm definitely finding that there's absolutely enough, because I was comparing it to the original suite of GRM tools, which I've been using for quite some time actually, and there's a whole range of modules that come with that. And I think there's like nearly 20 with things like Doppler, evolution, grinder, shift, shuffling, spacers, space grain, warp, and so on. So it's kind of things that aren't obviously related to what you see in Atelier. But actually, from some of the modules, you can see that they obviously are related, and that they've kind of like put a few different units from the old system into these modules. And it's very modular, and it feels like using a kind of physical modular system when I'm using Atelier. So it's exciting. But what I was thinking with such a small number of modules is that what can we pull out of one single module? And so I thought it'd be interesting to put together a bit of a tutorial thing and just explore a single module. And now we're limited to an extent with what we can explore there, because there are only 2 modules in the current system that make their own sound. So you could only you could use them as one single module, and that's GRM Gen, and the other one, which is GRM Play. Okay, so let's start with something that's already reasonably interesting with GRM Gen, and you can look to the last tutorial to see how to get to this first step, because we're going to start from the green walnuts patch. So that it's just one module, we're going to get rid of these other ones. So this is the old green modules patch. So we'll just get rid of those. Let's get rid of all of the modulation as well, except for the one that's just driving that snapshot. So if you want to know how to get to this point, then just check out the tutorial before this, the green walnuts tutorial, and you'll be able to see how we get there and why that's changing chords. So I'm going to save this so that we've got a reasonable starting point, and just call it GRM Gen start. And as you remember from last time, the snapshots are actually driving this follow control. So we're going to just lock that so that it's not being controlled by the snapshots. And then when I bring that down, we'll start to hear what that's doing. So you'll recognize this from about, I don't know, 2/3 of the way through the back of the last tutorial. So that's our starting point. So I'm going to stop this being controlled by the modulator just for now, because what we're going to do is just see whether we can kind of do something a little bit different. And what I'd like to do is control the pitch with another modulator, and so the pitch is already being modulated in a sense through the snapshot. So what we need to do that, let's just find one of the snapshots. I happen to know it's number 7, with the maximum number of notes in, so that anything we do here will be reflected in the other snapshots. So that little hamburger there shows us lists all the generators. So if we just, I mean, there's several ways to choose all of them, but if we can just click and drag, then we can choose all of the generators simultaneously. Let's create another modulator, agitation, and just apply that to pitch. Now, as you can hear, that's pretty wild. So let's just speed that up a little bit, and let's just maybe reduce its effect a little bit, just so it's not quite as wild. And then just speed it up a little bit more. There we go. And I think this might be a good point to just show you the polyadic nature of the modulation system. So let's just close this down for now. And this little button here, as you can see from the tooltips, it turns on and off the polyadic nature. So if I press that, you'll see that there's only one modulation signal now being sent out to all of those modules, whereas when it's off or on, depending which way you think about it, then actually it's a little bit like, so there are 7 there are 7 generators here. What we're actually, it's equivalent to having 7 different modulations all going at the same speed, and so that's kind of interesting, exciting. So what might be quite interesting in terms of getting an interesting kind of generative patch going is to be able to turn that on and off. Now I've done some exploration around this, and it's for some reason you can't just apply a modulator to that switch, and I don't know whether you're supposed to be able to, but it's something that I've not been able to manage to do. But what you can do is take this modulator called control and apply that to that switch, and then you'll see that you do have control over it through just taking that either side of 0. Okay. So I think it'd be interesting to be able to kind of switch between those, and one way to do that, so this is a very clever little modulator that it will remember an amount of time of wiggling around with this controller. So let's wiggle it around a little bit and set ourselves an amount of time. Let's say, I don't know, 5 seconds. So I'm going to leave it mostly in going parallel, and then just go a little bit wild for a bit, and then take it back to parallel. And then if we loop that, then you'll see that what happens is not what we wanted. So let's try and reprogram that again. So take the loop off, start again. So we want it to be mainly that. It's still not quite doing what we want it to do. I think I'm leaving it for longer than 5 seconds, so let's just... Right, that's what I'm aiming for. Sorry, that took a while. So mainly in parallel and a little bit of wildness, and that'll just keep cycling around because the loop's on infinite, it's on 100%. So it takes quite a little bit of getting used to this little modulator here. And the other thing to remember about this is that when I turn the system off, it will forget those movements, and so it's just something to kind of bear in mind. So that's what I was aiming for. That's kind of interesting. The other thing that is kind of interesting is this here, the ratio between pitches. And so if we just move this manually to a start with, you've got this wild kind of ratio thing happening, and so you can kind of make it really kind of close to each other and low compared to being really rather far. Wow! is add a little modulation to that. Let's take impatiently here, and then just apply that to that there. Now you'll notice that these little white dots, what we've just done is we've added modulation now to this overarching kind of pitch control, and they're all different. So if we want to retain our little parallel movement, then we'd need to kind of to move it like that, so that kind of moves around as one single thing, up high and really low. So let's just reduce the effect of that a little bit, and maybe speed it up a little bit. Now remember, we've still got the option of swapping between the snapshots, and so let's add that back in for now. So interesting, that's also driving that mix, which we'll just take off. And we'll add that back into the snapshot, and make sure the snapshot is around about 5. So the chords are now changing, but it's also going wild around that. So let's just reduce the wildness a little bit, and maybe speed it right up so it's like a waggle, but really tiny. So it's more of a just make it a little bit more real sounding, I guess. Just 2% on that, and it's going quite fast. So I've still got a rough idea of a rough sense of the parallel movement, followed by the little bit of wildness. But with a little tiny little bit of waggle on it, and just increase that just so you can hear. Maybe just increase that a bit more. And then just turning that down again. There we go. So it's just a subtle little modulation there. Okay. So we've got everything kind of going there, and one thing that is still being driven by the snapshots is the timbre over here, the tone, or the kind of the quality of the sound. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to lock those off from being controlled by the snapshot, because what we can do is then just control those separately, and so we've got a different type of wildness. Now this last one is noise, and I'm going to leave the noise out for now, just so that we can retain the tones, but obviously that's an option if you wanted to add that in. So let's just get just a general, let's have a bit of each wave. And then these controls up here control the quality of the wave, and so these are the ones that kind of change the tone of the sound the most, I guess. So let's add another modulator to each one of those. And as you can see, the tone is changing quite nicely there. And what's nice also is that even though we did that 3 times, we effectively added 3 different modulators. So you can see the little white dots there moving. They're all moving differently to each other, and again we can click that and they'll move more in parallel. Okay. So one other thing we can do is we can add a bit of an envelope to that. So one way to do that is to use the peak, which is like a kind of I guess it's a little bit like an envelope generator, and apply that to the gain. But in much simpler, easier ways. I was doing some exploring and I realised that you can even control the module power switch, which kind of surprised me, and that does work with the agitation. So what we can do is we can simply turn the module on and off using that modulation, which I actually think is really cool. And let's get that going reasonably quickly. So we've got this kind of thing going, but then we can add jitter to that to make it a little bit more wild. The only thing we've then not played with yet is the spread. Now the spread's interesting because when that's on maximum, you'll notice that all of the generators turn white, which means that they're on in the middle. And if you're hearing this in stereo, you'll notice that that is the case. Now I'm just going to lock that off from being controlled by the snapshots. You'll notice that when it's right at the other end, you get complete left and right. So the green ones and the red ones are distributed between left and right. So obviously what we could do with that also is kind of add a bit of modulation. I mean, there's no reason why we can't use this one. Or maybe perhaps this one, the green one, to modulate that spread as well. And maybe just with all of these modulations, you can turn up the modulation. So even though we've turned this down so that it's not so wild in terms of the timbre, we can actually turn it up here so that it has more of an impact in terms of the spread. And you can hear that now moving around, so you can hear all the generators kind of moving. I just noticed also that up here, we've got the initial kind of settings of all of these, and so we can actually still adjust those if we want more of a kind of a square wave kind of thing going on. And so actually, you've still got a fair bit of kind of manual control over your patch. So I think that's kind of pretty interesting. It's kind of a fascinating kind of thing, and it's kind of moving around in quite a peculiar way, which I kind of quite like. And let's just listen to it for a few moments and see whether we're happy with that. I guess it's a little bit like speech in a way. It's kind of quite complex and kind of like quite jerky and jumpy. Not sure where it might be useful, but it might be useful somewhere. You never know. Alien voices or something similar. So that's kind of an interesting little kind of exploration of GRM Gen. And kind of thinking about maybe kind of doing other explorations kind of a similar nature, just to kind of get under the hood of what's possible and what the edges of the system are. Obviously, with all of these things, you can still use the overarching controls like the morph time, so morphing between the different chords, and so that's much more kind of like stepwise when that's morph times off. And you can see it kind of jumping between states there, jumping between those chords. Obviously, if you change the chords, then you can change how the overall patch works. You could have some chords being really low, some being really high, and so on. So yeah, there's loads of possibilities even with this particular patch. So I'm just going to save that with Control S and Command S, sorry, and yeah, that's our patch. I'm not sure what it should be called. At the moment it's called GRM Gen Start. Actually it's called GRM Ren Start, as I can see type that there. So yeah, hope you've enjoyed that. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see any more or hear any more, or any particular suggestions. I know that some of you are locked off from the system for a while because you're on Windows, and hopefully in not too distant future there'll be a version for Windows, and so we can all play together. But until then, I'm happy to play on your behalf. So yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.